Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage SHI Chief Technology Officer Jordan Mauriello.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I'm really glad to see you guys all again this morning. I hope everybody had a great evening, enjoyed the event. I'm sure everyone is feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Nobody overindulged at all. We definitely won't need any energy to keep you guys going this morning. So I'll try to bring a little bit of that because I'm sure none of that's going to be needed at all. However, before I do that this morning, I would actually like to say thank you to some people in the room. There is an amazing team of staff from both our marketing and events teams that are here, including our production and sound crew. They put on an awesome event for something that's hosted and run by us, and I just wanted to say thank you to them. If we could please give them a round of applause for all the incredible work that you guys do to make this possible for the awesome event. You guys are amazing. All right, so today we're going to be talking about brilliant at the basics, and I think this is an important topic for us because often in our industry we get focused on things that are very much not the basics. We get focused on the advanced things, we get focused on the newest thing, and maybe a little bit of shiny object syndrome too as well, especially in security. So before I do that, I'll take a little bit of time and actually introduce myself. I am again Jordan Mauriello, Chief Technology Officer at SHI, and I am the guy assigned to keep you awake this morning. Some of you probably don't know anything about me, so I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and why you should care about anything that I have to say this morning about cybersecurity. So previously, I was Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Stratascale. I moved to CTO role soon enough, or most recently enough, that my badge for the event actually still says CSO and Head of Stratascale. I've been in the CTO role all of 16 days at this point. Some of you in the room may actually know me from having been one of the co-founders and leader for the MDR business at Critical Start. Some of my old crew is here in the room. Shout out to my homies there. Spent about 10 years at Critical Start, loved it, had an amazing opportunity there, building that business from the beginning with them. I have been doing cybersecurity for 26 years now, dating myself just a little bit. I started my career here, where I spent entirely too much time in places like this, and this, and this. And eventually I went to work here, hoping that I would spend much less time overseas and away from my family. I was dead wrong about that, by the way. Eventually, I left the government sector and I went to work here. I spent 8 years building as head of global security operations. Started with a team of 6 people, built that to a 53-person team with a follow-the-sun model and the full tier 1 SOC capability. This is before modern MDR and MSSP was even really a thing that we have today. And learned a lot about scale and problems and security automation, and probably every APT that you can imagine is something that we saw at that business. On a personal note, I'm a big fan of both of these things. For those of you who care enough to know, that is bourbon, not scotch, and mostly because my taste in scotch is way more expensive than my taste in bourbon. I like to do things like this and this. I'm really into these, and buying, collecting, and recording with these, and I have figured out well at this point, 22 years in a marriage, that every time I buy one of these, if I don't want to have an argument with my wife about it, I also just buy her a purse at the same time. So guys, if you're into guitars, this is my trick, okay? Just balance it out a little bit. For some reason, even in my mid-40s, I still like to do things like this. That is my marathon mustache. I do shave that in every time I run one, and my wife absolutely hates it. I also still like to do things like this, even though every time now I feel like I got run over by a car, especially since my 21-year-old now is getting to be better at it than I actually am and is starting to kick my butt. This is what my family looks like on Instagram, minus this sweet, cute little guy right here. But especially with my daughter, this is what it looks like on a regular basis, which is also what brings me back to my love of this. All right, so enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about Stratascale. Some of you guys may not be familiar with us, or some of you guys may be familiar with us in some of our previous iterations. But we have redesigned this business with a focus on being the premier high-value security services business. We are the cybersecurity services business of SHI. And just like Matt was talking about, where we're the #1 rated software reseller on Gartner peer reviews. That's the goal for this business, is to be the #1 rated cybersecurity services business that becomes your trusted partner in this area. And that's been an obsessive focus for us for about a year now. And I would put us up against any competition in the industry. We have some of the best talent, some of the best competencies, some of the best quality services that we can possibly provide, and we're going to be continuing to build this business and grow this as SHI continues to grow. We'll talk more about that later, and I hope I can get a chance to talk to you more about that potentially at our booth later, where I'll also be myself. But before we step into what we're talking about today in Brilliant at the Basics, and even talking about building a cybersecurity services division, we have to talk about what is the cyber strategic goal. And I've worked to define one of these over the last few years that I think is fairly universal. I think most people can agree with, and I want to share that with you before we even kick off and get into the meat and potatoes of this presentation. The objective of any cybersecurity strategy should be an obsessive focus on protecting revenue generation, revenue opportunity, and company reputation while defending against loss via fines, fees, and other legal punitive measures. In the end, it's always about the dollars. And that's the reality. It is always about the dollars, because that's also what the attackers are after. They're after your company's dollars. We see that with a movement constantly closer to revenue in the methods that they attack us, like going directly after our executives with phishing and smishing attacks, with conducting wire fraud schemes, transferring money directly out, or rerouting payroll attacks. Some of you guys may have read, seen, or even experienced some of these things. Our customers certainly have. But also, it's about the dollars in the way that we spend. It's about the dollars in the way that we look at ROI and how we adjust for risk in our businesses, how we choose the tools that we work in, how we choose our partners. We should be looking at things in a sensible way where we say this dollar spend is also going to equal this risk reduction, and we can also measure and show X by Y to our board, and they can have a high confidence level that as practitioners and leaders in security, what we put in from an investment perspective gives them a very real return on protecting the revenue generation and dollars of the business overall too. So today we're talking, obviously, at the whole conference about AI and cybersecurity. And you guys have heard so much about AI over the last couple years, and probably every conference and in every talk. And obviously we talked about it some bits yesterday on stage with Dave DeWalt, and it was interwoven in multiple things that we brought up. Right? You guys have heard about AI as a novelty, maybe even played with it as a novelty, and we go back at the release of ChatGPT 2 years ago, and we are like, oh, now we have the greatest meme generator ever known to man right at our fingertips. I certainly use it for that all the time. I have a very strong meme game that I keep in my ELT chat. We've also used AI as a productivity tool, and if you're not, cannot recommend this enough. We should be looking at it for things like this. This is a really simple prompt that I had up there right now. Create a standard mutual non-disclosure agreement document for Acme Incorporated, right, with a couple other conditions. And the document it created was a very good basis for an MNDA document. I actually went through and reviewed it. It had every key component. It was legally sound. These are things we should be doing. In fact, I'll give you a little AI productivity hack, just talking about how everybody should be using AI today and how you can use it. And I'm actually going to credit my brother-in-law, who is president of a pool company, construction business in Florida. And he is an AI power user. And he enables his entire business as a pool corporation doing construction and outdoor patio work on AI. One of the things that he does, and as a hack that he shared with me, is he has uploaded to an agent his favorite leadership and business books. How to Win Friends and Influence People, Gino Wickham's Traction, Good to Great, Extreme Ownership. And then he uses that as a business coach or an executive consultant. And so let's say that you had maybe a politically contentious situation in the workplace, and you got an email from a peer or another executive, or clearly there was a problem, something you needed to work through, and you could take that email and hand it to your agent and say, hey, how would Dale Carnegie, author of How to Win Friends and Influence People, respond to this email considering the following factors? And instead of spending 60 to 90 minutes writing and rewriting, as I have often done in history, to get your email just right and politically correct and not contentious and try to accomplish your goal, you can get one of the top executive coaches in the world, one of the top authors on influencing and bringing people along to your side or on the journey of something to help you write that email instantly. So just one quick AI hack before we jump back into security things here. You guys have probably heard of, if the slide will change, there we go, AI as a potential threat vector. If you were here for the April summit, you heard me present about this at length. And this is actually one of the attacks I presented, where I used a jailbroken version of a very common and maybe trendy large language model at the time, and asked it to develop a social engineering campaign against my own organization, Stratascale.com. And this was so well done and so accurate that I actually had to go in and change the names and some of the details on that before I was willing to post it up here, because it picked up on every leadership change that happened after I joined the organization, people that had left, things that had been said online, any new employees that had joined the organization, changes in go-to-market motion, and then even developed the optimal targets internal to the company and gave me draft emails for what would probably be optimal to get a high click rate from a certain group of people internal to the company. Now, again, jailbroken model, logical jailbreak that was done on this, but a common and accessible large language model that is out there as a SaaS service today. So we've seen these vectors, and we also see them being used by attackers that are out there in the world. Right? And this is not just about the increase in efficacy that you can get from that, because that's certainly there. But as somebody that has been on and run pen testing teams in their past, I can tell you that the amount of work that would normally go into developing this campaign to get high click rate is probably 72 to 96 hours of research work across multiple people. This took me less than 90 seconds. That includes doing the logical jailbreak and writing the prompt to get the results that I actually wanted. This was very, very good. Right? And you have to think about if an attacker can actually do that and they can accelerate themselves along this journey that much faster, how much more attack surface can they cover? How much more can they actually do as a part of an organization? Now, we've also seen AI play into attacker trends for things like insider threats. And if you haven't read about famous Cholima, I highly recommend you go read CrowdStrike's industry threat report that they release annually. It is one of the best threat intelligence reports that we can get for free in our industry on an annual basis. Go check it out. It's absolutely worth your time to read. But this organization has developed a new TTP where they actually get themselves hired at organizations. And they use AI to help enable them to do this. They're using AI automation to respond to emails, AI to join calls, AI audio responses, and they look and feel like a real employee joining accounting and finance teams and then transferring dollars directly out of those businesses as they reroute payroll to new accounts. Very, very sophisticated attack vector. We've seen it in deepfakes, both audio and video. Dave was talking about one that happened from an audio deepfake against the chief of staff from the White House just recently, where the entire contact list was exploited from his phone, and then a deepfake audio voicemail was sent out and had a very high click rate for an attack. These are things that AI is playing into that we have to consider. And so as an industry, generally, how do we start responding to this? And this is one of the things I think we have to maybe look ourselves in the eye a little bit on and realize that as technical people, especially technical people in cybersecurity, we might be the most guilty of shiny object syndrome. I have been guilty of this in the past, even when running a MDR business before, and my CTO and one of my partners in the business is actually here in the room. Him and I, we used to screen like 100 technologies a year, at least. And we were always looking at what are the newest things and what we should keep up with. And we would have a hard time not getting distracted from our core mission to want to integrate with some of the new cool things that we would see. We want to bring this to customers. We want to figure out how to make this a part of our MDR service. And I think we can all be guilty of this. And our industry has this motion that tends sometimes to not be the right response to change. And that's so in this now we have AI attacks and AI tools and AI security. And so there's this rush to research AI security tools, buy immediately and implement and then watch amazing and magical things happen. Because what we're often being told is that this new tool that integrates some LLM or some AI capability or some ML algorithm will now solve every security threat. All your worries are over. Just give this PO to your seller. And that's not the reality, that even though we have new AI threats and people are saying, well, to solve AI threats, obviously you need AI and you need it for data analytics. You need AI for automation. You need AI for response. But this isn't the thing that's always going to solve the problem. And when we talk about it being all about the dollars in the end, and that being core to our responsibility, even as security practitioners and leaders, sometimes the most important thing is to be focused on the basics. So why then this topic? If we know all those things, because the basics work. Across every attack vector, across every breach that you read about, the basics will and would matter. Security awareness, password security and multi-factor authentication, privileged access management, vulnerability and patch management, configuration management, detection and response. When you have the right people, the right processes, and you practice these things regularly, it is highly impactful to building a great security program. This is some of the best ROI that you can possibly get in your organizations. And often you already own the things you need to do every single one of these. You might not have it implemented, you might not have it fully configured, but there are often organizations that we go into where there are deficiencies in the basics, and we're saying, hey, you actually own this as a part of your ELA with Palo. You actually own this as part of your E5 with Microsoft. We should implement this. Hey, you already have processes and policies in place for this, and they're not really being followed. Or you haven't done a tabletop to validate that these contacts and response procedures are up to date, and that's going to be a key miss on detection and response. Right? And if we do those things right, we can have a very high impact. And now to prove my point, I'm going to tell you guys some stories. Stories from the pen testing trenches. Names and details change to protect the innocent, but all the technical details of every one of these attack stories is actually true. I had the privilege of being on, leading, and then owning an organization that also had a very successful penetration testing team for years now. I still remain technical enough to do that kind of work. I simply don't have the time to do it. But up until the day that I left Critical Start, I still taught the reverse engineering and assembly language programming course for our level 4 security analyst. I still love this work. I wish I had time for it, but I don't anymore. But I do have enough time to at least tell you guys some stories. So let's dig into a couple examples around this. Target package number 1. Financial services vector. We had a physical security and financial services customer, large organization, very strong budget, very strong team, looking for threat actor emulation, including physical security testing and insider threat. This essentially means from them that they want us to emulate the best possible attack. An APT, what would it be like if the PLA targeted their organization with what FireEye called APT-1 back in the day? Armed guards present at every campus, well-funded programs, updated technology. They want to truly test the limits of their security program and testing, even including up to trying to get to their vault. Break-in. Initial assessment. Physical security was very tight, as one would expect. Network perimeter, very little exposure. Things were secured, locked down. Maybe if we had spent a lot more time in custom web application code that was out there, maybe we could have found some code-based vulnerabilities that would allow us to break in. But what we did find is that security awareness seemed lacking. Well, how did we know that? Well, we made observations while actually watching people going in and out of the building. We did perimeter reconnaissance, and we looked at social media. And on social media, we found a post of somebody celebrating their new job, and on that post was a picture of their badge. And as a good pen testing team, any good pen testing team does, we had a badge printer. So we took that picture of that badge, created our own version of that badge. Obviously, it wasn't HID programmed and wouldn't have gotten access to anything yet. But what we did do is make that one looks very real. And then we took one of the female members of our pen testing team, and she strapped on a fake pregnancy belly, filled her hands with folders, and a purse, and a coffee cup, and she walked up to the door that was right outside the employee-authorized smoking area. And what do you think happened when she got to that door? Someone let her in. She walked right in the building, and once she walked in the building, in one of those bags, she had a mobile device that is power over Ethernet access, 5G UC capable, that was our physical backdoor into the systems. And we plugged that in under a desk, and this visual demonstration is obviously not very discreet, but it's just to show you kind of what that looks like. Ours is much more discreet. It's about this big. And we even do things like fake MAC addresses that match the devices we see people using in the organization. So if you're using HP devices, we know what the first part of the MAC addresses look like for HP devices. We would match that, so it doesn't even look anomalous on your network when we plug it in. And so we plug in this device, its PoE, its cell phone signal out to us. We have a permanent backdoor into the network. From there, though, what we found was this was a fairly segmented network. But interestingly enough, the logical segmentation around this was by floor, which didn't necessarily make a lot of sense to us until we realized that, well, most of the sensitive assets in the building were on the higher floors. Right? On floor 2 and 3 were the data center, sensitive systems, and the vault. And on the bottom floor was mostly just kind of, I would say, admin operations. Right? And what we did also find, though, was on the first floor was the primary entrance to the building. And with that, the physical security badge system. Now, we didn't have immediate access to that system. We couldn't find a vulnerability. But we did find a couple other end-user compute systems that were vulnerable. We got into 3 of them. And on those, we found one singular service account that was the same across all of those systems. And on all of those systems, that one singular service account also happened to have the same hash stored in memory for what the password was. So what did that immediately tell us? That this was a shared service account across multiple systems, probably existed everywhere in the environment. And the hash attack wasn't working at the moment, but what we did have was a very powerful password cracking system. This was a good investment. Again, any high-quality pen testing team probably has something like this. This system had 8 of the highest quality GPUs that money could buy at the time, all strung together, working together in one system to crack passwords specifically targeted at, for us, NTLM v2. Right? And we have an understanding of probably the namespace that we need to attack. It's probably between 10 to 14 characters. Highly likely that's going to be the most common area. We plugged that into that system, and now it took us 3 days while we did other work, and then, what do you know? There's a cracked password. We use that to log into the badging system. Then we give ourselves access through the badging system to the rest of the network, because we can actually program badges with the badging system that we also own and can match what they own. Very easy to buy that stuff on eBay, by the way. So now we have real-looking badges with real access, and we give ourselves access one bit at a time to every area of the building as we begin to explore it, eventually landing ourselves in a place where we took a nice, fun selfie right in front of the vault door. I did not put that in the pen testing report. I don't feel like the CISO would have liked it if we posted on Instagram. We would not have gotten a thumbs up, but we did share it with him at one point, and we did get access all the way through that. A simple attack, and the responses to this are often things like, well, we need anomaly detection for east-west traffic. We need to go buy new technology. We need more complex passwords and more frequent changes that could be more interruptive to the environment, actually make it harder to build partnerships inside the business. We need more people for physical security, more armed guards, put more people out there, more cameras, more spend. And the reality is, simple things would have stopped this. Things that probably have very high ROI with very little spend probably wouldn't have cost them $1. They already had security awareness technology deployed in the environment to do this automatically for them. But they were not making it mandatory. They were not making a part of the culture of the business. It's important to do. If there had been good security awareness training, that attack would have been stopped right at the beginning because we would not have tailgated into the building. Proper segmentation of the network. Clearly, they could already segment. They already had all the hardware needed to do that, but the logical segmentation they had chosen did not keep us from some very critical assets. We should not have been able to access the physical security systems. Proper policies around service accounts. Why were we allowed to do an interactive login with that service account? Should never have been allowed. Should have been limited access. None of these changes would have cost them $1. Every single one of them would have stopped us from getting to the vault. This is what we're talking about. Brilliant at the basics matters across the board. Let me give you another example. Right? Somebody who got it right when we were doing a pen test. Medium-sized organization, energy company, strong experienced CISO, very small team. 6 people total in IT across about 1,800 employees. Focused on operating leverage at scale, using security awareness and good training programs. They brought everyone in the business into owning and being a part of security for the business. One of the things that their CEO used to say was, act and think like an owner, and he did that by giving everybody shares in the business too as well, and did good profit distribution. So the CISO took and owned that phrase. Said security is part of acting like and thinking like an owner in this business, right? And he had that printed out and placed all over the place in the building, and he did training, and he imbued it into the culture. And so when we went to break into that building, doing tailgating, as we often do in the evenings, waiting for right when the last people are starting to leave the building, and we literally will watch. And in this building, we could see through a big front glass window, 3 stories high, big staircase that came down. We're timing people coming down the stairs. From the top, it's about 35 seconds to the front door, timing that from when we need to get out of the car and start walking in. We space ourselves out about 10 feet apart a piece so that we have like a 10-second window that we can try to match up with theirs so that when they're coming out the front door, one of us is there to hold the door open for the rest of us. And we've done this a lot. We're well practiced at it, obviously. And we walk up, hold the door open, walk in, joke with each other, act like we belong there. We're making our way up into the building to find an office that we can work in for the rest of the night. We're not supposed to be in there. And that guy who had let us in stops before he walks out to his car, thinks about what he just saw, turns around, walks back in, follows us up the stairs, walks back to the office that we're walking into and said, hey, who are you guys with? One person with proper security awareness training. That was what it took. We were so impressed with that, it's so rare that it actually happened, that ourselves, we funded an Amazon gift card, $150 to give to that guy. But this was culture that was imbued to the business, and they didn't need to spend an enormous amount on physical security to stop us from getting in. They need one person who was like, you know what, I remember that training. I should go ask these guys what's happening. Now, obviously, we had our proper documentation. We had a call with the CISO. We made sure he knew who we were and why we were there. But we captured, hey, we were stopped from actually breaking into the facility. One more story. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time for all of them that I planned here. Oil and gas vertical. Very large oil and gas with strong security capabilities, large, well-funded organization. This was an insider threat simulation. We did not have to do physical security testing. We were already in the building because the primary risk that they were worried about was data loss on critical research. Right? They do a lot of research. Many of you guys may know that in energy and oil and gas. There's a lot of proprietary research on extraction methods and all kinds of chemical compounds that they do. And this was very, very sensitive to them. They wanted to know if it could be compromised. Now, they had great vulnerability management and user compute systems, strong configuration management, really good security awareness training, large problem with old devices and legacy systems being supported on the network, though. So we were in this environment. We were there about a week. We had made no progress. 0% click rate on phishing attacks. No vulnerabilities that we found. Unable to access any system. And we are just mass reconning the network at this point. Like, can we find something? What is out there? What can we see? And we stumble across an aha moment. And that aha moment for us, after a week of work, is an old load balancer device in front of a legacy application. And that old load balancer device presented itself to us with a port that is very common and very exciting for pen testers often to see, port 23, Telnet. And so we see this device. We identify what the device is based on the prompt that we see there. We go look up on Google default login and password for this old load balancer device. And guess what? It worked. So shortly after that, we're in this Linux system, right? Because that's what this load balancer was on the back end. Most appliances are. We're on this Linux system. And we can't get anywhere else. No additional access to the network. No new things that we can see. But what does Linux have built into it? A set of tools that already exists. So we start running TCP dump. We're collecting data over the course of hours. We're pulling it off the system. We're analyzing it in Wireshark. And then one of my pen testers in the room says this. You think if the username ends in -DA that it's a domain admin account? Why, yes, good sir, I think that's possible. And it was. And unfortunately, they weren't doing good practices. And hint, hint, if you're not doing this, separating out your domain admin accounts for non-interactive logins and only using it to escalate privileges after you've logged into something, then you should really consider that. And they were not. This was allowed for interactive login. And now we had the domain admin password, well, we had the domain admin hash, and we had the domain admin user, and we were successful in conducting a pass-the-hash attack across the network, accessed multiple systems. That became a prolific compromise. And then in the room, something to the effect of game, set, match was said. If you're from the younger generation, we can give you a GG all, or if you're from my generation, you probably know what we actually said in the room was, and pwned. If you get that one, you're old enough to be friends with me. Now, the common responses to this, we didn't catch this because we didn't have UEBA. We clearly need a better EDR EPP technology. Our vulnerability scanners need to be replaced. We need to spend more money. We need more devices. And the reality of it is, again, that the basics would have mattered here. Vulnerability management processes and coverage. You could not scan these legacy systems because it would crash them. How many people here have seen or experienced that in the real world? I have. Yep. Reality that sometimes we face. So what do? Well, we have to go through policy exception processes. We need to make sure things like this are documented all the way to the board, and then we need to apply better controls like microsegmentation, zero trust for those specific systems where there's only one way to access them, and we put a jump box in place where there's additional authentication requirements and multi-factor in place that would prevent you from going from that device out to anywhere else without that. Another thing that would have been really, really helpful, treat these as critical assets for detection and response. This is a key, right? The response time for these devices for the pass-the-hash attack and accessing them was 3 hours. At that point, game over. A 3-hour response time is not going to be sufficient with a sophisticated attacker. Who got it right? Local, small, government office in North Texas. Small org, newly promoted CISO, small budget, very small team, everyone's multifunction. But the CISO is from a SecOps background, so he focused on what he was great at. High automation investment, quarterly tabletops for IR. He developed risk profiles for the assets on his network, documented where he had to make exceptions for critical systems that were legacy that he wasn't allowed to update or change. And then he treated those with a different risk profile with his MDR and internal SOC. What that led to a 20-minute or less response time every time we compromised one of those systems, which was multiple times that we found these legacy systems and compromised them. And we could never make it a prolific breach of the organization because they kicked us out within 20 minutes every single time. This was a very effective mechanism to respond to it despite the fact that he had to deal with these policy exceptions. It was fundamental basics. It required no additional spend beyond what he was already doing. He just got detection and response, risk profiling correct in his organization. We don't have time to go through this one because I'm just about out of time here. So we're going to skip back, even though that's a fun story to tell, and maybe I'll get a chance to tell it to you guys another time. But what we will talk about real quick before we call it a day is that the basics done well matter. Every single test, every pen test, every breach, every incident response engagement that I've been pulled into, every single time I find core fundamentals, basic processes, basic systems, things that align with NIST CSF scores that we should measure ourselves again. I find those things done wrong in a way that would have mattered to stop the breach. Very rarely do I go into any situations like, hey, you need to go spend a significant amount of dollars on bringing in this new technology. That's the only way you would have actually stopped this attacker. That's just not reality. It may be what you hear quite often, but the reality of it is that it's people and it's process 9 out of 10 times. So what do? We refocus on the fundamentals, review, measure, processes, configurations, and exceptions. Align to a framework for org understanding. I love NIST CSF. I know it's not the most detailed. I know there are more detailed out there, but it is becoming one of the most commonly accepted and talked about enough more broadly in the industry that even your board is starting to hear of this framework. Right? We hear it talked about from the White House, from CISA. It's getting broad scale and wide adoption, and what you need is board level understanding of the risks and the ROI that you're trying to do. So align with the frameworks that you can measure ROI spend, and as you move risk in the organization by spend, you have a framework to align to and even measure against your peers. 3, conduct tabletops. Use real-world scenarios. Ensure your processes and responses work as you intended. And 4, invest in high-quality security testing. Do not check box off your pen tests, guys. You're not doing yourself any favors. You need someone in there who is going to find the problems and not just give you a sheet that says, yes, I did my annual pen test, it's complete. The results of that are not to your detriment, but to your benefit. You use that to build your plan, your budget, and your risk profile for your business. You use that to plan with your board how you're going to actually fix the problems in the organization. Don't see it as a negative if the pen test team is good enough to get everywhere in your organization. That's how you find what a real attacker would do and actually protect it. Don't hide from the truth. The reality, good process and well-trained people are a better investment than new technology 9 out of 10 times. This is what we see in organizations. This is just our real experience. And so when it comes to that as an organization, this is what we do. Helping you train people, build process, assess your environment, build risk profiles, manage the key systems right, and get the fundamentals right. That's what we design our services around. In fact, we call our set of services core services at Stratascale for a reason, because we believe they're core to the fundamentals of what needs to be done right at most businesses. Right? And even today, we're launching what we believe to be another core service. It's right on launch for us that we call Modern SOC. It's a combined service offering of doing proactive and reactive detection and response services, combining threat intelligence monitoring, threat exposure monitoring, vulnerability management with great MDR capabilities that we partner with Critical Start for. We'd love to be able to talk to you about how we can help you get some of these fundamentals right. We'll have our whole team. We have a great representation here at our booth today. And if you're interested in having discussions about the basics, about what you can get right, or even hearing the last pen test story that we didn't get into today, I'll be happy to talk that through today with you guys today over there. So thank you guys again for the time. It's my honor to be here. Thank you for you guys showing up today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.